Hello, hello. This is the June 4th DBA Fundamentals virtual chapter um, session. I'm excited to have all of you guys here. We are here today with Warner Chaves, and he's going to be talking to us about the Azure Data Migration Service, Journey to the Cloud with the service. The timing is absolutely crazy because we just had Microsoft here at our offices and to speaking about this. So this is this kind of crazy timing. So it's awesome. Little bit of stuff before we jump in and hit the ball running. So there's a lot of information on this slide. I'm going to leave it up for just a moment. A lot of our links that you can get to us, dbafund.org is our web address, and you can look at all of our upcoming sessions, just like this one. Great content, well worth the read. You can also look at our YouTube channel. It has like 4 years worth of content out there. So, and we run basically 2 or 3 a month. So there's just so much wealth of information out there. And you can look at that at dbafundtube.org. You can also check us out on Twitter at DBAFun. You can go to Slack, and we have our own channel. And then we also have LinkedIn. So there's a lot of networking and a lot of ways to reach us. And then, of course, to all of our readership. So, and then also we have all of the organizers' names up there. Steve and Shane, who are here tonight, today. Warwick actually runs more of the down under side of our chapter. And then Kevin and I both, and then you can see our Twitter handles there. So if you want to reach out to us, but we all see the @DBA Fund on Twitter as well. So we have 2 great sponsors that help us bring such wonderful content to you every month. And first one is CenturyOne. They help you with building and testing and documenting and monitoring SQL Server and other Microsoft data platform products. So definitely check them out. You can check them on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, which is the information right there. They have so much online to help you out that they actually have one blog post or one web page that lists all the different resources. So the CenturyOne.com/resources page just is nothing but links to other stuff. So definitely check it out. And you can download a free trial of their software as well as the Plan Explorer, which is an amazing product. It actually comes as a standalone, but also as a plug-in to Management Studio, and it really gives it enhances the visual of plans and such. So definitely check them out. And of course, let them know we sent you. Oh, I have to update. There we go. And our second sponsor is DBWatch. They're an enterprise, a complete solution for database administration, monitoring, performance tuning, security, and license management. I mean, just everything. So, and they actually do for SQL Server, Oracle, and other platforms. So whatever you're looking at, they probably have something in there for you. You can check them out online, on Twitter, on Facebook. And again, they have a lot online too. So check out their blog.dbwatch.com. And you can also get their free trials from their software as well. So at the DBA Fundamentals virtual group, we are a member of PASS, and we are one of their virtual groups. They have many different virtual groups, and so this just kind of gives you a list of the virtual groups that we have right now, and you can see it ranges from cloud to hybrid to security to PowerShell to virtualization to BI or BA, whichever. So there's just a wide breadth of stuff that you can look at. And here are some of the upcoming virtual chapter sessions for the different ones. Professional development's coming up. Cloud. Oh, they have 2 or 3 actually this month. Us, another one, DBA Fundamentals, Architecture, and Business Analytics. So, and this is just a snapshot that would fit on the slide. So definitely go online, check out the different virtual chapters as well as us, and come back and see different sessions. Another event that would be I love from PASS are SQL Saturdays, and it's a free. Basically, it's a training palooza, I like calling it. You go, you get to network, you get to have free sessions, and you get to meet the speakers and other people around and such. And there's also giveaways sometimes not. But it's just it's an awesome free event. So if you get to get one near you, they are worldwide. I'm only going to point out the US, Canada, just because that's where we are at the moment. But there's Dallas coming up, South Florida, Columbus, Virginia Beach, LA, Iowa City, Tennessee, Pensacola, and Austin. So definitely check it out. And you can go to SQLSaturday.com to see all the whole list. Again, it's exciting to be worldwide with that. It's such a great event. Also, the PASS Summit is coming up November 5th through 8th, and the price just went up. It's now, the full price is like $21.99, but you can use our code, which is the big green code in the middle, and save $150. So definitely use it. The price will increase in a little while, so make sure. I believe since it just went up, it'll be a few months to do again, but definitely check it out and use the discount code. It just saves you money. All right, so I'm about to turn it over to Warner, but this session will be available at dbafundtube.org and along with all the other content, but you will be able to see this within a day or two. All right, let's get it turned over. Let's make Warner presenter. All right, you should be able to share your screen, Warner.
Yeah, let me know if you can hear me well. You can see my screen right now. Should be a Google
just fine,
Slides.
and I see PowerPoint. Yep.
Okay. So let me go full screen here. Works.
Yep.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining today here at the Fundamentals chapter. Really excited to be presenting today this topic, joining to the cloud with Azure Database Migration Service, because really it's just, nowadays the cloud is just that we're being pushed by all the big IT companies, and I just see more and more of my clients just talking about how do they migrate to the cloud, how do they migrate in a way that's also efficient and not too expensive as well, right? So good time into, like Linda said, to check out these topics. Probably you'll be hearing about this coming in your office very soon, if not already, right? So quick, and allow me to introduce myself. My name is Warner Chaves. I've presented before for the chapter. I love doing it. It's great to be able to, easily from our homes, just target a global audience like the one we have here today. I've been a DBA and a consultant for 12 years now. I used to work out of Hewlett Packard in Costa Rica. I work in Canada now for Pythian, which is a database services and data engineering company. I'm honored to be a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. Feel free to reach out to any of my social media. I have my Twitter handle there. You can check out my blog, my email, and also check out the company blog. We have a lot of technical resources there as well. Right. So the agenda for today, of course, is we're going to introduce the Azure Database Migration Service, which I call ADMS because it's a mouthful for sure to be saying that all the time, and the capabilities, right? So we're going to go over why it is the service, why should we care about a service for migrating databases, how is the service structured, what is the cost, and the features that we have. And of course, we're going to do some demos. So there's going to be some slides. We're going to go then into creating a service. Then we're going to come back and see some other slides. And then we're going to just continue and finish the hour with a migration. And I'm going to show also the data migration assistant from Microsoft, because that's also actually comes in pretty handy as well. In my opinion, should be part of the workflow in general. And we'll see why as well. Okay. So the only prerequisites that you need for this session is you have some basic database experience, you have some basic Azure experience. It's pretty much it. I assume everybody here, though, you're members of PASS, so you're probably all at least experienced with SQL Server on premises. So it's great. So let's talk about the database migration service and some of the obvious things out of the gate. So it's a service at Microsoft Azure. And the whole idea of this is to remove the friction of moving databases to Azure, right? So the idea is that you don't have to do things manually yourself or figure out most of the steps yourself, but instead you can just rely on a cloud service to walk you through the process, right? So it's a streamlined experience, very much just fill up some forms, next type of thing, and we'll see what it looks like on the demos. And then after that, the actual process of that migration is a managed service, right? So you don't have to boot up a VM. You don't have to worry about the uptime of the database migration process. You don't have to incur into any extra costs, right? If you need to migrate some databases, use the service for a few days. Once you're done, you destroy it and you move on, right? Keep in mind here something very, very important is you see on the slide, nowhere in the slide does it say that the migration service only works with SQL Server. It's actually a general database migration service. And further in the presentation, we'll see all the different sources and targets that are supported right now. But just to make it really clear, it is not a SQL Server database migration service. It's a general Azure database migration service, okay? So let's talk about what's the value add here, or the value proposition for somebody that wants to use this service compared to just doing it on your own, right? So whatever solution you do, if you have to do it on your own, well, you have to set it up and configure it yourself. In this case, like I said, use nothing to manage. You simply boot up the server and the service, and off you go, right? You don't have to boot up any VMs. You don't have to install any software. Second, if you're doing it yourself, you need to figure out the migration mechanism. Now, if you are a seasoned and senior DBA, then probably the migration mechanism, you are more than comfortable to figure it out on your own, and you would not need this part as a benefit. But for many people that are pretty new to the whole world of the cloud, or to the world of migrating a SQL Server to a cloud service, or any of the other databases that are supported by the service, then it is a lot easier to just go with whatever mechanisms Microsoft has already implemented in the service and not try to, rediscover warm water on your own, right? If you do it yourself, you have to obviously make sure that your solution is running okay, right? If you planned for the migration at a specific time or a specific day, you have to make sure that you have everything ready at that time and that you don't have any downtime, that you have a good connection and so on, right? Again, this is a managed service, so it is managed and monitored by Microsoft. It lives in the Azure cloud. So all these items of reliability are already covered for you, right? And again, if you're just migrating one database that is 10 megs and it takes 20 seconds to upload it to the cloud, well, then probably this is not a big deal for you. But if you're migrating large databases, terabyte range, or if you're migrating small databases, but there are a lot of them, right? We're talking about, I have some clients that have a SQL Server instance on-prem that has 2,600 databases. So for them, it's not trivial to just go ahead and migrate the whole thing manually, right? There's a lot of automation that has to go into it if they wanted to migrate to the cloud. So do they build the automation themselves, or do they use something like Azure Database Migration Service, right? So there's definitely some scenarios where the whole reliability and robustness of the service are really important too, right? Very large databases, very large quantities of databases as well, right? And then for some reason, let's say you had to provision some resources on-prem, or you had to use some software on-prem. Well, depending on what you're doing, you might be left over with some resources that you no longer needed, right? In the cloud, it's a lot easier. You just use the migration service, and once you're done, you destroy it, and you don't get billed anymore, and that's it. And actually, the billing is very attractive. We'll go through it later on today. I mean, I'm gonna be really honest. There's some Azure services where sometimes I look at the pricing and I think like, oh my God, there's nobody ever's gonna use this. This is not one of them. So I can say that out of the gate, this is not one of them. Okay, so you might be thinking, oh, okay, so this is a one-stop shop for migration. And unfortunately, I still don't think it's a one-stop shop. I don't know if Microsoft's really gonna invest into making it a one-stop shop, because they already have other tools that cover the gaps that the migration service does not cover, right? So for example, we have the data migration assistant from Microsoft, and this is basically a compatibility detector and also can do one-shot migrations for SQL Server and Azure SQL DB, and or SQL Server to now it's going to be also Azure SQL Managed Instance, for example, and I believe it also does SQL Server to Azure VMs as well. So why do we need the data migration assistant? Well, basically because, and I'll show you guys on the demo, the actual Azure portal experience through the Azure Database Migration Service does not offer the analytical capabilities that the data migration assistant does. So to give you an example, and this is going to be the example in the demo, file stream, which is a SQL Server feature that some of you might be using. File stream is not supported in Azure SQL Database. It's actually not supported in managed instance right now either, at least not yet. So if I want to migrate a database from on-prem that's using file stream to Azure SQL DB, well, I probably want to know that before I go ahead with the migration. I probably need to do some application refactoring and so on to be able to execute this migration, right? So I want to do this analysis step first, figure out these things, and then I can go ahead with the migration itself, right? So the migration service itself does not come with these analysis capabilities. It just comes with the migration part, right? So if you try to migrate that table that has file stream, then that particular table is just going to fail to migrate. And probably you don't want to get these surprises at time of migration, right? You want to do the analysis first, figure out, oh, these things are going to give me some problems, so I better just, figure out if we can migrate or not, and know that before the fact, right? So that's why the data migration assistant is still valuable. And then there's another tool if you are actually targeting to move from a different platform to SQL Server. So then that's the SQL Server Migration Assistant, right? And that's the one that can be used for Oracle, Access, DB2, MySQL, SAP ASC, right? So again, the migration service is not going to help you with the platform movement in terms of figuring out the analytical, to doing the analysis of what features you have to change or what code you have to change, whereas the migration assistant, it's a full-blown tool. You can do the analysis of what features you might be missing if you move from Oracle to SQL Server, or what code you need to refactor if you move from MySQL to SQL Server, and so on, right? So these two tools complement the database migration service, and that's why, the database migration service, as useful as it could be, does not encompass these two tools. And I don't think it's ever going to, because obviously the ADMS is just an experience. The Azure portal is not meant to be a complex desktop application. The data migration assistant is not a particularly super complicated desktop application. The SQL Server, for some of you that have used it, the SQL Server Migration Assistant, it is most definitely a complicated desktop application that it doesn't make sense to just recode it in a cloud web version if we already have the desktop version, right? So this is what I think should be the ADMS workflow. Is you identify the databases that you think are good targets to move to the cloud, or that you are getting some pressure to move to the cloud. You should use the database migration assistant for analysis and optionally to create the database. Then you can use the database migration service for data migration. And when you're ready, you can do the cutover to Azure. So if you're just gonna do a one-time small database, you can actually use the database migration assistant end-to-end, right? So if you have a very small database, you think you want to migrate it to the cloud, you can take a bunch of downtime, then you can do the whole process with the database migration assistant, right? You wouldn't need the database migration service for that. Where the database migration service, again, gives a lot of value is what I mentioned before: really large databases or many databases, things that you need to run at scale, so that you don't have to worry about what happens if something happens in the middle of it, right? And then you might need to start from scratch. All these other processes that you need to monitor more manually if you were to run this on your own, right? If you're just doing small databases, you can take lots of downtime, then by all means, you can just use database migration assistant. But if you're doing something more complicated, then the database migration service is a good idea because of all the advantages that I already mentioned, right? And when you're ready for doing the cutover, well, then you just have to redirect applications from on-premises to the cloud. If you're doing it that way, a more common approach, of course, is to just migrate the application as well to the cloud, in which case you just have to, again, reconfigure that application that is in the cloud to connect to the copy that you have migrated. So let's get out of slides for a little bit here, and I'll just show you the interface for creating the service and some of the things that you have to select when you create the service. So let me switch around and go into this and close this out. And let me see here what we got. There we go, we're in the portal now. So I'm gonna search here for the migration service. If you just type here migration, you'll see right away I find it as Azure Database Migration Services. And you can see I have one already created, which is the one we're going to use for the demo, but I'm just going to click here to add one right now so that you guys can just see the creation experience. That's pretty much it, okay? So let's wait for here to display to load. And as usual, when you're actually showing people something, now it's like super slow to load the blade. So let me just try it again. And there we go. All right, so you have to give it some sort of unique name. So let's say, we just wanted to do this pass demo session, and you have to select your subscription here. You can create a new resource group, for example, if you wanted to just say like, pass demo session, same thing. So I can create a new one. Then you have to pick your location. Obviously, this is critical. You want to pick an Azure region that is close to where you actually are so that you have very low latency. Let's say, for example, I'm in Ottawa, Ontario, so I would select Canada Central, right? Now you see here it actually makes me select or create a virtual network, right? And it can actually detect the VNets that are available in your subscription. So this is something very important, and I will go through the slides in a little bit to see some diagrams of how this works, but just to give you a preview is that the migration service actually lives inside a virtual network. So for those of you that are experienced with Azure and how the resource model works in Azure, then you know what virtual networks are. If you're not, then basically what that means is that it is not a service that just lives in like some part of Microsoft's Azure Fabric and you only get an endpoint, right? The service actually lives inside a virtual network that is part of your subscription, so that there is a network security boundary around that service, right? And I think the main reason why they created it this way is because of all the lots of security requirements nowadays where people don't really like to just have open endpoints out in the internet, and this is a service to move data around, which nowadays there's a lot of scrutiny around moving data. So this is a more secure approach that they took for this service, is that you have to place it inside a virtual network. So it's not going to be open to the internet by default, right? That also means that communication to that database migration service happens through this virtual network, so that your traffic has to go through that virtual network somehow, okay? So, well, like I said, I have a few slides that will go a little bit more detail with some diagrams on how this works. But for now, it's just something that you have to see. It's part of the creation experience. You have to plan for that before you go ahead and start creating. You have to make sure that you want to put it in the right virtual network. Okay, I'm just going to leave it blank because I'm not going to go through with creating it anyway. And here what we have is, you see there's a couple of different options. There's standard and then there's premium. And I have a few slides as well to the detailed differences on that. But the main thing that we need to know is that standard is free, okay? And standard is a one-shot movement. It doesn't do constant movement of data. So it's not for something that, let's say you're gonna start the migration today and you're gonna keep using the database on premises, and then you're gonna do the cutover on Friday, right? Standard is just for one shot. You took an outage today, we're moving it all today, and that's it, right? Premium is the one that allows you to do that movement, ongoing data movement between your source and your destination, okay? All right, and we'll go into more details here in a little bit about standard and premium. And So let's go back to the slides. But that's pretty much all you need to specify. Main things, like I said, pick the region that makes sense for you. Plan for having it inside a virtual network that you'll be able to communicate through, and then decide if you want standard or premium as well. Okay. So I am not going to actually create this. I'm just going to close it down. Yes, fine. And let's go back into my slides. All right. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of configurations, right? So we have a default configuration, which is all cloud. Let's say you already migrated some databases to SQL Server VMs, and now you think you want to do the take the plunge to Azure SQL DB, go into a full managed service. So then it's very easy in that sense. You can just place your database migration service inside the same virtual network as a SQL Server VM, and then allow communication to that SQL DB from that virtual network, and you're done, right? So in this case, you don't need any external components to the cloud. You just need to configure the right cloud security settings to make sure that everything can talk to everything, and off you go, right? So this is the easiest thing to do, of course. Now, a very, very common thing that is probably very likely to happen is that many people are going to use this for on-premises to cloud, of course. So in this case, there has to be some way for your on-premises environment to communicate to that virtual network that hosts that ADMS, right? In this case, what it has to be is either express route or a VPN, right? So you would have, let's say, for those of you that are not familiar, the express route is a non-public circuit that you can buy from many big telecom providers that will give you a direct connection to an Azure data center, right? So for example, here in Canada, I believe the big telecoms here, are called Bell and Rogers, and they can give you express route, which means that the data does not go through the public internet. What it does is that it goes directly from, let's say, your offices in an office building, and it goes through a circuit or on Bell or Rogers data center. And then from that circuit, it goes into their connection that they have with Microsoft to the Azure data center, right? So you can see at no point there, you are just putting traffic out into the public internet. So that's important for security reasons, very important for performance reasons as well, but only the big consumer clients usually go with express route, right? If you're just dabbling into the cloud or you're a small shop, then you can go with a site-to-site VPN. Site-to-site VPNs, of course, they are secured by certificates and strong encryption, but they are still routed through the public internet, right? Which means you are still susceptible to just general internet traffic, your internet connection going down and so on, right? So, but it's definitely something that works, right? It's definitely something that works. So with VPN, my concern would not be necessarily with security, because I don't think people or have hacked the VPN security. But my concern would just be with the unreliability of the connection and general speed that can fluctuate up and down quite a bit. Again, if you're doing just something very small, one database or whatnot, not a big deal. But when you're dealing with things at scale, then it can be a bigger problem, right? And then there's another one, another configuration that Microsoft is piloting. I believe this is in private preview right now. I don't know if maybe it already moved into a public preview at this point. Private preview basically means that they're not letting just anybody use that preview feature. What they're doing is they're just onboarding specific companies to kind of do more of a controlled test environment. And they are calling it the hybrid database migration service. And what it does is it basically uses an agent called the migration worker that you can set up on premises. And this migration worker becomes sort of a proxy to the cloud connection, right? So that can give you, instead of just having to specify full-blown express route or VPN to connect to networks, you could just do a connection from the migration worker into that ADMS specifically, right? So in some scenarios, it could make sense if, for example, security reasons that they just don't want to open up a full-blown connection between the two networks. You just want to have a point connect and that's it. And again, It really depends on the scale of what you're trying to do. If you're just doing something that doesn't really require a full-blown network connection, then maybe this makes more sense. Or if you're under some sort of security requirement where you can't open a big range as well, then you're just allowed to open like one IP or something, and then this will make sense to isolate it into just this migration worker would be the only one that would connect into the ADMS, and then the SQL servers on premises would only connect to the migration worker, right? So I know this is in preview right now. Not really sure when it would actually make it to the public. So right now what we have fully available is the on-prem to cloud through express routes or VPNs and the all cloud configuration as well. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the service model. We just saw a little preview there when we saw how to create the service in the cloud. There's two tiers, standard and premium, which has different price and capabilities. Now, if you are a customer right now, there is a limitation that you can only create 2 database migration services per subscription. However, I was told that this is not a hard cap limitation. It's just something that Microsoft is putting in right now to, I guess, gauge the interest in the service and also to somewhat control how many of these get deployed, since the service is fairly new. But from what I'm told, if you just want to create more, you just have to create a support ticket. It's not something that, like I said, there's some sort of technical limitation or hard cap where, you know, there's a big technical reason why there's only 2 DMS allowed per subscription. You know, there's none. It's just some sort of, again, more like a process or procedure thing that Microsoft is following with the new service. And if you create a support ticket because you need a third one inside your subscription, then they'll very likely just oblige, right? So this is an interesting one. Standard is 1, 2, or 4 cores that you can use. There's not much more into what they define in terms of power, other than it's a 1, 2, or 4 core machine that will run your migration process. It is offline migrations only. So again, it will not keep some sort of data replication between your on-premises and the cloud. It's just going to do it offline. That means you got to take downtime that day and plan for, depending on the size of your database, you'll have to plan for a while that the database is going to get migrated. Of course, you shouldn't just guess what that time will be. This is just regular migration advice, is that you should always do a dry run of every single migration that you're responsible for, so that you know exactly how long it takes, right? But this is regardless of database migration service or not. Like, you should do that always, if you're just migrating from on-prem to on-prem, right? And again, if you guys are experienced DBAs, this is going to be obvious advice, but you never know. So it's always good. Dry runs always. Quote me on that. And then it's free, so that's good. If you're just doing offline migration, you don't have to really pay for anything. You just have to boot up the service, you use it, you destroy it, you never paid anything, you don't have to worry about it. Now, there's something really interesting here, is that the service is free, and you have an option of 1, 2, or 4 cores. And then I thought to myself, and you're probably thinking to yourself right now, but if the service is free, then why wouldn't I just pick the largest amount of cores that I can pick, which is 4, so it just goes as fast as I want it to go? And the answer is yes. That's exactly what I think, the same. Like, just pick 4. Like, I don't understand why anybody, given free, would pick 1 on purpose, because, you know, you want your migration to go slower than it could. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they left the options of 1, 2, and 4 when the service is free. So my advice is just go for 4. Why would you pick less, right? You're not paying for it. But it's still kind of puzzling why. Anyway, premium, you don't have an option. You always get 4 cores. Premium can do offline or online migrations, but obviously the big difference here is that premium can do online. So if you're going to do offline, you might as well stay with the standard. And the charge is about 40 cents an hour. Now, you might be thinking, well, charge 40 cents an hour, that's you know, 40 in 10 hours, that's $4, right? In 24 hours, that's going to be $8. In 8 days, that's $64. It doesn't sound particularly cheap. Yes, but you see, there's a 6-month free period from creation. So if you have a migration project that is happening and you know that you got to complete it in the next 3 months, you will not have any cost because you just got to create it. And if you destroy it before the 6 months are done, then you never got charged anything. Okay, so it's not bad. If you are thinking that you will have to end up paying at some point, well, then my advice is to not really create the service until you've done all the other things, like you've figured out the analysis with the data migration assistant, so you know you're not going to have the service just idling while you're doing that phase, right? Just wait until the very moment that you're ready to really start the migration process of the data, and then at that moment create the service so it's not too expensive for you, right? But in any case, I would expect that most people will just take advantage of the 6-month grace period and plan accordingly, right? And that would be my advice in general. Okay, and then once you have the service created, we'll see this with more detail in the demo, but basically the hierarchy is that you create the service, and then inside the service, you can create projects, and inside those projects, you can create activities, okay? Now let's see which databases are supported, because I told you before, it's not a SQL Server migration service, it's a database migration service. So we can see here, offline migrations, there's a lot here. We have Azure SQL DB supported for SQL Server, for RDS if you're coming in from Amazon, for Oracle, managed instance is the same. You can actually use the service for a Mongo to Cosmos DB migration, for example, which is very interesting, which is NoSQL, right? Then we also have the migration from, let's say, RDS PostgreSQL or an on-prem PostgreSQL to Azure DB for PostgreSQL as well. So a lot of different sources, a lot of different targets. And then there's also the continuous sync, which is called the online migration, and that would be Azure SQL DB, SQL Managed Instance, SQL VM, Cosmos, MySQL, or PostgreSQL, coming in from lots of very different targets. A very interesting one that you can see right now there on the screen that is in private preview, for example, is migrating from Oracle to Azure DB for PostgreSQL. So for some of you that have some Oracle or PostgreSQL experience, you'll have probably realized that there's a lot of compatibility between Oracle and PostgreSQL. In some cases, a lot more easier to migrate than doing Oracle to SQL Server itself. So this is a very interesting migration path, I find, for Microsoft to try to capture Oracle clients that don't really want to go into SQL Server, but they might be open to going into PostgreSQL, right? And they can capture them with this migration path here of going from Oracle to Azure Database for PostgreSQL, right? All right, and that's pretty much it for the slides that we're gonna check out. And let's just go back into the Azure portal. And now I'm just gonna show you guys a couple of different things. So before we go into the portal, I'm actually gonna show you something else, and is the Data Migration Assistant, just in case you are not familiar with it. Because like I said, I really recommend that you start your migration project here, because the Data Migration Assistant is going to do the analysis and is going to give you that heads up to fix some things before you actually do the migration itself. So it's very easy tool to use. So I'm just going to do, if you see here, it says project type, assessment, and also a migration. I'm just going to give it a name here for the project. And then the source, I'm going to select SQL Server, and then I'm going to say that I'm going to migrate to an Azure SQL Database. Just create the project there. Okay, and then you have to select what the tool is going to do. So there's a check database compatibility option, and also check for feature parity. And then there's a new option that says coming soon, that says benefit from new features. That's interesting. We'll see what they do with that. In this case, so I have to connect to my local server, so I'm just going to do it right now. And press connect. And I have an old SQL 2008 here on this particular box. So you guys can see I just selected it right now. It's an AdventureWorks 2008, and I can just click here, Start Assessment. So the tool is nothing complicated to use. As you can see, it's more of a config next, and immediately you get some sort of a report that you can go in and analyze, right? Now we can see there's some unsupported features, for example, and then here's the famous one that I was talking about, which is the file stream feature, right? So for example, that gives you now the heads up that you gotta go and work with file stream and try to take file stream out if you need to migrate to Azure SQL DB and so on, right? So this is where the value of this tool is in terms of your migration workflow, right? You definitely wanna know these things before you attempt the migration, right? All right, so let's go back. Let's say you did the analysis. You know that file stream is not gonna work. It's okay. You're okay with that happening. Okay. So we can go into the demo migration service and you can start a new migration project. And then you can give it a name here. Just say demo project. And then we are going to do SQL to Azure SQL Database, right? And here you can select if you're gonna do an offline online migration, and there's also the option of an schema only migration, right? So you can see here, schema only is at the very top. So you could do schema only if you just want to create that database structure, but you're not ready to move the data yet, for example, right? In this case, just leave it as offline data migration, and we can go ahead, and it starts here by taking the metadata from us in terms of where we're going to get the source. So here, like I said, it's a SQL 2008 VM. So let me see if this is going to work, hopefully. If not, I already have another pre-made project. Let's see. Oh, it's because of, let's see, it's expecting SQL 2008. Let's see if this works. All right, so that worked. That's great. And now for the target. So now we gotta put the target here will be the Azure SQL Database server that you're going to be using. Now I already have pre-created one, so I'm just gonna type it here. It's perfdemos.database.windows.net. Okay, and I'm just gonna use SQL authentication. I have my credentials. Boom. All right, let's see if I should connect. Okay, so you guys see now we got the metadata of how to do the source and the target, and then it brings you to this screen to basically map to the target database, okay? So you guys can see here the source, it finds that AdventureWorks 2008 that I have on premises, and you can see here, oh, get out of the space here, Azure, thank you. And you can see here now I have a choice as well for target database, right? So I have a few databases there already created on the server. And if I click, for example, this AdventureWorks 1 database, right? I'm gonna select it. And let's say I want to, for example, we're just gonna head and say we wanna use this one. And then we're gonna get here a drop down of all these different tables that are part of the source database and that are potentially you're gonna move into this new database, right? So you can select them all if you want. And just pretty much just figure out which ones you want to move over. Now there was a way to select them all, but I forgot how it was here because I definitely don't want to click them all. Oh, actually, here's the problem. All right, so this one says the tables must be created before migrating data, right? All records in non-empty target tables will be deleted. So the problem here is that the tables are not there, right? So pretty much it means that we gotta go back and we gotta create the schema first, right? So this is an issue that this has in terms of what you select as an activity, right? Because we selected the offline migration, you would think that it would just do it as a one-shot. We actually have to go back here. And so we need to create a new activity, right? So we were doing this demo project. Okay, so let's create a new activity inside this project. We're going to do the schema only migration, right? So we have this metadata is still there. Just the passwords are not saved though. So I do need to put my passwords back. Same thing here, put my password back. Okay. And now what we're going to do, like we saw before, if we don't have the target table already created, it doesn't go ahead with migrating, right? So what we need to do then is to actually do the schema only migration first. So we're going to go ahead here, pick the same AdventureWorks 2008. And now you see if I select AdventureWorks 1, it says the target already has schema. So it's not going to do it. It has to be into an empty database to do the actual migration, right? And we have some options here about generating the schema, or if you want to take the schema from a schema file, if you pre-generate it. In this case, I'm just going to say generate it from the source, so it's going to connect into the 2008 DB, and that's how it's going to generate that schema, okay? And we can see here, now I have this activity name, which is going to say schema generation. It has all the metadata, and then there's some validation options. I'm not going to validate it because obviously in the interest of time, we're not going to sit through that. But you can validate it so they actually, after the service runs the activity, it's going to check and see that all the tables are there, and if there's not, then it's going to give you a report there as well. So you can see here it says it's running, it's collecting objects. Now it might run there for a little while, but now we know how it works. Now while that is completing, we're going to do the I'm going to show you guys here a previous run that I have. And you can see here I have this previous run. So this is kind of like the cooking show where they show the cook thing at the end so that we don't wait for the 3 hours in the oven. So I already ran this before. So you guys can see this is going to be what happens now with this schema migration that we are doing. And basically the whole point here, you're going to get, this report at the end with all these errors. And if you go into the errors, you'll see it says keyword statement option file stream on is not supported in this version of Azure of SQL Server, right? So then you get a bunch of errors related to extended properties that could not be updated, and some full text indexes that could not be created, and it all stems down from the fact that that file stream table, if you look at the code there, it's called document. It has a file stream file group. If that table fails to be created, then of course all the properties that are part of this table and so on are going to fail as well, right? Because the table itself does not get created. Keep in mind though, all the other tables that didn't have any issues do get created, right? So that is fine. At that point, obviously, if you were expecting the issue because you ran the analyzer before, then you're free to just ignore it if you know that the file stream part was gonna fail anyway. And you could just recreate that table manually, for example, without the file stream, of course. You would have to do that anyway as part of your pre-analysis phase. That's what I would recommend. Now let's go back and see if maybe this, oh, you can see now it's updated, the migration schema part, and it actually says it's deploying the schema. And we see now live that, yeah, we're getting the same errors that I just showed you guys that I got before as well. It basically means the file stream part is the one that's going to fail. Okay, so I'll give it a couple of minutes here. We're still got a little bit of time before the hour, so if we can, then I'll just show you the data migration part. If not, I'll show you already the one they already have done if this ends in the next few seconds to deploy the schema. If not, like I said, I already have this one already completed, and we can just look at that one. I'll just give it a few seconds here and see if it works.
While you're giving a couple seconds, do you have a time for a couple of questions?
Yeah, let's do that actually, and that
Okay.
more efficient with the time.
Is it possible to migrate small databases with DMA?
Yeah, for sure. DMA, like I said, if you have just small migration, small databases with, very relaxed downtime requirements, you can do everything with DMA. I don't have it. I wasn't going to show it here as part of the presentation, but you can actually see here where DMA can do migration, right? In the project type, there's two project types. There's assessment and there's migrations, right? And it's very similar. You can select the source type. In this case, it's only SQL Server as the source because DMA is only SQL Server. But you can select a bunch of different targets, and DMA has the scope here of the migration. You can create the schema too with DMA. So something that you could potentially do is move the schema with DMA and then do the actual data movement with DMS. But if it's a small database and you have lots of time that you're allowed to take a downtime for it, like if you have 100 meg database and they give you a whole day that it can be down, then you can just do it all through DMA and not use the migration service, right? That's okay. The difference, like I said, is when you're trying to do things more at scale and you want to be able to select many things at the same time, right? So let's see how this far.
I'm guessing there's really no size limit, so when we're talking small, it doesn't really matter what size at this point, right?
No, well, small is what I would, in my opinion, as small as things that are less than a few gigs, so that it's not a huge deal to just do them in one shot. Usually as things get into, the 50 gigabyte range, 100 gigabyte range, then it's going to take a long time to do it, and you probably don't want to be doing it with DMA because it gets a lot more unreliable, right? DMA crashes and your migration is done, right? Your VM crashes, your migration is done. So for those things, that's where I think DMS and the reliability that a managed service provides is a lot more attractive, right? So, all right, so well, this one was done, completed with warnings as we expected, because the file stream is just not there. But we can go back into our project, and now we can add the offline data migration activity. And this is the same thing. I do have to admit, it's kind of annoying that every time you make a new activity, you have to put in the password again. I guess it's some sort of security thing that they're gonna have to maybe try to make easier to work with. But for now, this is how it works. All right, so we did create that Adventure Migrate, which should have the schema now. It's just empty. And let's open this up, and now we can see it is not what we were getting before, right? We got the all the target doesn't exist kind of thing. Now we actually see the map. So we got all these tables. If you want to create them all, then if there's one in particular that you don't want to move the data over, well, then you have a choice. By default, it just selects everything. And here we'll call it move data activity. And at that point, that's it. You just go ahead. There is some validation options as well. For the data movement, it's actually more interesting because when you validate, it has three options here, show you guys. And it does schema comparison, And it can also do a data consistency, which I mean, I particularly probably wouldn't want to run just because of the intensity of it. But I mean, if you have lots of time and you just want to be 100% sure, then by all means you can do that. Because what it says is it does a checksum of the data in the source and the target database, and then it makes sure that all of them were the same, right? So it's pretty intensive into what it does to your database. But I mean, depending on your scenario, then why not? You might need to take that into account, though, that you're going to be running a checksum for probably hours. And then there's another option, which is query correctness, which is you just put in a select query, and then the results are run on the source and then on the target, and they're part of the validation is to make sure that the results are the same. So that's kind of an interesting halfway point between validating all the data through checksums and just making sure that your most critical data for sure is there. So you could do that as well. In this case, I'm just gonna leave it to not validate, save, and run migration. And that's it, off it goes. And in a few seconds, it'll start moving as well. And just show you guys, of course, we're gonna move into the cake that's already baked. And you'll see this is what it looks like when it's done. So this is AdventureWorks 2008. You can see here it says completed. And it's 180 megs, took 9 minutes, 70 of 70 tables completed. And it gives you an actual breakdown here of how long it takes for each particular table to complete, which obviously is very handy. As I mentioned before, you always want to do dry runs of things so that you'll be able to tell for sure. Let's say somebody asks, like, well, we're gonna migrate AdventureWorks on Saturday. How long does it take to do the migration? Well, you can say, well, my piece just takes roughly 10 minutes. If it was me, I would say it takes 15 so that I have a nice buffer. And obviously you can apply this to whatever scenario you have. It might be that you're not just migrating one database, you're migrating a bunch of them, and then you just, you'll have the total duration and you'll be able to decide there how big your downtime window might need to be, right? So that's pretty much it. I guess we are good, just right on time. I don't know if we have any other questions at the moment.
Yes, I have a few.
Okay.
So how do we connect the Azure Database Migration Service, you're right, DMS is much better, to the on-premises SQL Server instance? Can you show a brief demo on that real quick?
Yeah, well, like I said before, that's all based on, I can't do a demo right now because I don't have an on-prem SQL server. Mine is in the cloud. But this is basically the scenario. It's an express route or a VPN connection from your virtual network into the cloud. If you are not the network person in your office, then unfortunately you will have to talk to the network person in your office to be able to make sure that you do have this option for you to set up the connectivity from on-prem to the cloud. The alternative would just be to expose your DMS to the internet, which is obviously not recommended at all. So yeah, you need either one of these components, and it's not something that you should just roll on your own because you're opening up a network path between your on-prem and Azure, and I would definitely get whoever runs your network to be on board before you go ahead and do that.
Okay. Next question. Let's see. Oh, good, he answered. So it's a kind of a two-part. What would you use if you have a small database that needs to go from on-prem to Azure basically every day? So the on-prem will overwrite the Azure. And then I followed up with, are you talking like a backup strategy or, a migration window where it eventually be in Azure? He answered, the customer has a weird setup where they want me to follow, they make changes on-prem every day and then replicate those to Azure every day because Azure will, oh, just lost my window. Azure will
Yeah, so
power
that's not
another
really a
tool for them.
migration scenario then. It's more a data replication scenario, right? Because migration
Right.
migration kind of implies that you're gonna do the movement and at some point you're gonna end, right? And as a matter of fact, if you look at the cost, once the 6-month grace period is over, I would say the service is kind of overpriced. because they probably also because they don't want people to, you know, linger on their migrations for too long. It's a good incentive to make people actually get it done, right? So this service in particular is more for that. It's more for making sure that you get the process done, and at some point you're completely in the cloud. Now, for what you're saying, it sounds more like you should be using the replication, right? SQL replication works. If you're doing it to Azure SQL DB, you can have Azure SQL DB as a subscriber. So that's something probably that if I had that requirement, that's probably something that I would investigate to see if I can do it, to just have an on-prem SQL as a publisher and then as an Azure SQL as a subscriber, which is a 100% supported configuration, right?
Perfect. And then lastly, basically with ADMS, we are automating the backup and restore. How about logins, compatibility level changes,
That's a
post-migrations
really,
activities like
really good
rebuild,
point.
recompile?
Great point. So right now, it does not do anything other than moving the schema and moving the data. So the person that asked that, that's a really, really good point. It will be part of your pre-migration activities to make sure that, you know, you have your proper security settings, your logins, anything else that lives on a different scope that is not transmitted through the schema and the data. Yeah, you have to take care of that yourself. Now, when you're moving to Azure SQL DB, there's a lot that does not really live in the database itself because it's such a managed service. So for example, you know, if you have, let's say, I don't know, let's say something like a certificate, right? It's either contained in the database or it's not. But let's say you have an instance level certificate where that's not going to apply to Azure SQL DB. But if you were moving to SQL managed instance, then that does apply, right? So it kind of also depends on what target you pick, how complicated it will be to move all those things. Now, if you are not familiar with a PowerShell module called DBA Tools, I recommend that you make yourself familiar with it. DBA Tools has a bunch of really handy PowerShell commandlets that can do a lot of moving all this metadata over with basically one-liners. So in that point, the migration would look something like create the schema either with DMA or DMS, then use DBA Tools to make sure that you have all these other objects copied over to SQL DB or managed instance. And then for once that is all set up, like all the structure is fine, but the database itself is empty, then use DMS for your ongoing data movement until you're ready to do the cutover.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Warner. It really, really is great having you. I know you do several sessions for us, so woohoo.
Absolutely, and it's my pleasure. And yeah, hopefully everybody got something out of this. Go around and like I said, the service itself is 6 months for free, which is great for learning as well. Because you know, if you have access to an Azure subscription, you don't have to worry about getting charged just for playing around to do some migrations as well. Okay.
Cool. All right, so everybody else, a couple of things. If you want me to pass your email to Warner for some reason, then because I think we answered all the questions, but if you want me to pass your email, please use the questions to say that you're allowing me to pass your email. We can't do that otherwise. So otherwise, check out dbafund.org for our contact information, as well as all of our next sessions throughout the end of the year and such. It's a lot of stuff, so just make sure you get on there. And then also dbafundtube.org. With this recording will be up within a day or two, and then like I said before, like 4 years worth of content. So check us out. And lastly, everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Bye.